All right. Let me know how the audio levels are. I think everything is good to go at this point. If I am too loud, vocally speaking, I'm trying to monitor everything right now. And so hopefully it all sounds good. So I'm going to go ahead. This is a track that I was working on. Earlier today for Ghetto Benny. And him and I and a few other people are part of Collection B, and we are producing some beats. So I'm going to go ahead and put this track to bed and start working on another track. So let's see here. So we're going to go ahead and put, this right now is called Stripper. It's 138 BPM. So I really explored using mix buses for this track. It's something I haven't really done much in the past, and I discovered with this track that I was really able to get some great sound, just a really great sound out of the stems that he sent me to get this. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and pause it. Cool. Let's go ahead and open a new track. Yeah. All right. Cool. So this track that I'm working on, let me just make sure everything's good. Cool. So this track I'm working on is called Wizard. All right. Yeah, so this track is called Wizard. It's at 125 BPM. Let me go ahead, delete this because I'm not going to use it. It took me a while to get this setup working. I did a stream a while back, I think midsummer, and I realized after recording the video, the quality was terrible, the audio was terrible, so I kind of haven't really streamed in a while, and I'm trying to get back into streaming and just kind of have rolling the camera while I do my work, and if anyone has any questions or whatnot, answering them. I'll probably be mostly silent unless y'all are in the chat and you ask me some questions. At that point, I'll be more than happy to answer your questions and go from there. So he sent me the stems, and we were chatting about kind of what was needed in this track. This is something that we worked on like last week, I think. And so my goal right now is to just kind of get this really, sounding nice and open, and get those drums to kick really hard, like I was able to do in my last track. And so I'm using a technique that, like I said in the other track, that I'm a little new to, which is really using mix buses to improve the sound. In the past, I did most of my mixing just kind of in groups, and they sounded good to the people who I played them for, but they didn't feel like they sounded great. And so I'm working with a guy named Jeffrey Jones, who's done a lot of really great work. He's won a Grammy. He's worked with everyone from Eric Clapton to Public Enemy, and so I've had a chance to kind of peer over his shoulder and learn more about mixing. And along with my partnership with a guy named Derek, who mixes out of the engine room, I've really been able to kind of improve my overall skills. And so I just want to, I want to share it. I've always found that there's a lot of great tutorials online, but I don't know. I feel like this is a great platform to mix and if someone has a question, I can try to answer, or if someone has some good feedback, I feel like that could be really useful too. I'd love to learn something if someone in my feed has information that about hey, you should consider this. Now I don't know if the mix, if OBS is going to fully record kind of all the nuances of the sound. And if you're not wearing headphones while watching this, you're probably going to want to wear some headphones. Otherwise, it'll still sound good, but I know I've have to kind of down mix it in mono, and that kind of changes what the overall sound is going to sound like. Because I'm not really right now I'm not mixing in mono, so that's going to change things. So he gave me the stems, and I went ahead. They weren't cut up between kick and snare, and so I had to do some of those things. I went ahead. I like to keep things organized, so like if I close everything down and just kind of look at what we have here, I like to have up here at the top. I have my okay. I guess I could start from the beginning right here. I like to organize. When he sent me the stems, there was some arrangement, but there really wasn't. It was a loop for the most part. And so, part of what I'm doing too is arrangement, and just really basic arrangement of kind of like, I know I'm going to have an intro. I want a hook, verse, break. This is basically just another hook and then out, but I'm just calling it a pre-out. Might change things up a little bit. And so I usually, in my template, I always have my sidechain. I like to MIDI trigger my sidechain. So I'll have my kick and my snare. I like to send that and basically sidechain all the synths, FX, 808s, and all that good stuff to let the drums really punch through the mix. If you look at kind of how I set up my sidechain, I like to use a very, very short rim shot to trigger my sidechain. Let's trigger this. It's a very, very, very short, dry sound. So I can mute that because I'm just sending the MIDI data to the things that I'm going to be sidechaining. I do that with both my kick and my snare. And when it comes to my actual sidechain, and I'll explain more of this as I break down my template, I like to have two sidechains in a group here in Ableton, obviously turning on sidechain. In some of my songs, I'll push the ratio to infinite, but for this like hip hop sound, I put it at 4. Relatively short attack and release. Oh, I don't know why this is all the way up. This should be down. I don't do any parallel processing, and then I like to pull down the threshold so that way it really ducks the sound properly. So that's my sidechain track. Here we have the synths that I'm working with. In this case, it's one. I have this Drake pad I was working with on the last track, and I just really like the sound. And so I might see if there's a way to kind of turn some of the audio into MIDI, and then maybe having some have the pad play a little bit, maybe in the intro or the break or the outro or something along those lines. Next, I have the effects in this. So let me go back. I'm gonna play the melody that I'm working with. Everything's really quiet right now because I haven't really done a lot of the mixing. I keep a lot of my stuff at -15 dB just from the get-go. So yeah, just a simple pad, loop, and let's go. So then I have my effects. I don't have any effects right now, but I'm definitely going to have a reverse crash, probably leading into the intro. I like to have a reverse crash leading into all of the louder parts. So that way, or all of like the hooks, I like to use reverse crashes to drive tension. I find that music is basically tension and release, and so I really want to bring the listener in and push them into the next section. So yeah, so that's my effects. We have the drums here. Kick. There's like this other kind of kick that's like right at the end of each hook. Actually, it's right at the end of each section. I might get rid of that for the verses, but we'll see. I like to use a reverse snare leading into sections. So let's play the kick really quickly. This is what the kick originally sounded like. I might replace it. We'll see. But let's push this volume a little bit. Not super clicky, a little bit of a, more on the thuddy side. If we zoom in on the wave shape, it's pretty small. It's got that initial transient and then a little bit of a body. I like to cut the low end because that's where I know the 808's gonna rest. So I usually kind of almost brick wall the low end to like 43 hertz or so. It just kind of depends on where I feel like is great. And then I have this just preset fab filter with the low oomph. I like that sound. I don't know. I think it works really well. It's just a little boost here in the lower end, starting at 60 hertz, going to 250 hertz. I don't know. It gives the kick a little more of a thud. Here is that other sound. It's kind of almost not really a kick. It's more of a, I guess it's a kick just pushed up maybe an octave or so. But it was there in the stems that he gave me, so I'm keeping it for now. Reverse kick. Like I was saying, I really like using a reverse kick. You can't really hear it. I'm going to boost that volume a little bit. That's a little bit slammed, but it just leads from a quieter section in. It's kind of like a reverse snare, but it helps kind of fill out that tension. We have the snares right now. I have it grouped into a snare layer because the last track I worked on, I layered. I'm probably for sure going to layer the snare here. But here's what that sounds like for now. Typical trap snare. There's no rims right now, but I did have a rim in the last track, and so maybe I'll throw it in later. Maybe not for this stream, but I might end up throwing a snare or a rim in to kind of play with the groove a little bit. We have our hat group, which is broken up into a couple of different hats, closed hats. So we have the first closed hat. It's pretty short. And then we have this hat that does a roll. And it's a couple of semitones lower, which helps add kind of, it helps add a separation between the two hats and kind of dimension to the sound. It's very common. You'll hear that in a lot of like more trap or hip hop music. We have another hat. It's really quiet, but that'll probably obviously come up while I'm, mixing. But it's got a roll. It's similar to this one, but it's a little bit shorter and less of a transient. And obviously it's got the roll. So this is what they all sound like together. So, playing with different sounding hi-hats can really be useful when you are coming up with your loops. I have my ride. I think it's a ride. It sounds kind of like a ride. It's either a ride or like an open hi-hat. I guess you could probably say it's more like an open hi-hat, but for this sake, I'm just calling it a ride. But come to think of it, open hi-hat is probably a more accurate interpretation of the sound. But it wasn't named, so I can call it whatever the hell I want. No perks, but I'll probably pull maybe a perk loop in and chop it up to kind of give some more texture to the sound, but we'll see. And then we have my 808s. So we have his initial 808, which if we were to pull off the processing that I just initially threw off, it sounds like this. It's not really an 808. It's kind of, I call it funky bass because that's just kind of what it sounds like to me. Then when I add on the processing, because I'm building the 808 sound in layers, it sounds like this. Basically cut off all of the low end because all I want is that is the organic sound of it and a little bit of that reverb that he's got already on here. Now, this is something that I will be sharing on my website, kevinsavage.nyc. I have to put it back into the store. I'm giving it away for free. I'll be doing a whole video on how to use it, but I built this instrument rack, and it's incredible. Like, I am blown away by how powerful it is. And I will explain a little bit here, and then I'll do a more in-depth YouTube video probably here in the next month or so where I actually walk through how to use it and, what you can do with it. But basically what it can do is you basically can create your own 808 with it. I was inspired by, I think it's Kruth's video on YouTube he does a lot of FL Studio related stuff. And I was inspired by kind of this idea of like creating your own 808s. And so I was like, all right, well, let me do that in Ableton, and then let me take it a few steps further and add some extra features to it. So basically, this is a O&J clean 808 sound that's in the key of A. And so I've tuned it to the key of C, so that way when you're playing it on the piano in concert tuning, you don't have to compensate for you don't have to compensate for the pitch while you're thinking about what you're playing, and you can just play it and you know what you're playing. And what it allows you to do is basically shape that clean 808 sound into an 808 that you want that works and fits in your track. I have probably over 1,000 808 samples from the years of collecting sounds, and sometimes just none of them really work, or you got to pitch and tune it and do all this other sort of stuff. So what I said is like, well, what if I take a really clean sound and have macro knobs that allow you to basically make it, like, shape it. And so you've got your key, which is right here. This is just a arpeggiator, or sorry, not arpeggiator. This is a scale MIDI plugin in Ableton, which allows you to change the key of what you're playing, so you're never playing the wrong note. This is a glide time. This allows you to kind of do those 808 slides, and allows you to kind of control how much it slides. I'm not using it in this track, and I'm really not that great at using it, and maybe down the road I'll make some adjustments to it, but it allows you to basically do those 808 glides that, rather than automating them, you can still obviously automate it, but I just like having them all here in this macro selection. Sample fade allows you to determine how long the 808 is going to ring out. And this is a really long 808 sample. So, if you want something that's tighter, shorter, or longer, depending on the track, that's what this is for. This gain knob is let's see here. Gain. It's an overdrive pedal, and basically allows you to adjust how much gain you push into the sound, how much gain you push into the signal, and that's pretty cool. Grime is just like dirt. It helps you add a little more dirt, make it a little more crunchy. These knobs, tone, drive tone, and crush, all basically play off of the grime sound. It basically, you push the grime up and then determine kind of the drive and the tone. Or honestly, playing with the knobs is the best way you're going to figure out what sound works for you. But that's, that's what the 808 Maker allows you to do. So for this track, at least, what I've done is I turned the bass sound into MIDI notes with Ableton's audio to MIDI feature. And then got rid of all the notes that aren't important. That kind of happens when you turn audio into MIDI, and then adjusted those and quantized them and whatnot. And now what I have is I have my 808 top and my 808 bottom. Together they sound like this. And then what I've done is, in order to better process this, I split the frequency. So I put a pretty hard cut at 206 hertz, and then I did the opposite over here at like 212. There's a little bit of crossover, but not much. Boosted a little bit down here, and then trimmed basically the mud off the bottom and gave it a little bit of a boost in the lower register. And so together with the funky beat groove, it sounds like this. So that's what I did with that. So those are the stems, essentially, what I initially got, and then what I've made some slight changes here and there to. And now basically what I like to do is I will basically record all of the stems to stems right here, and then I'm gonna send these to the master track, which this is like my mix processing right here. Ableton doesn't really have, kind of like Logic or Pro Tools or whatnot, or even I guess FL Studio, it doesn't really have like a mixer. It kind of does, but you have to kind of be a little more creative here in Ableton. So what I've done is I have these audio tracks, and I'm going to route them. They're not routed right now because I'm still playing with this sound. But basically, I'm going to record the track as stems, which are great because I can then send these stems to someone else if I wanted to, or if we want to do a remix down the road, we could send these stems to play with. But they're not processed, they're clean, they're dry, other than whatever processing I do up here. And I don't do anything to these stems other than maybe boosting the audio to 0, or adjusting the audio based on how much signal I want sent into the master. But then I have these buses, and this is what I've learned that's really taken my game up to like the next level with mixing. Now, just a quick sidebar. Skrillex recently released Mumbai Power as a audio project, like video, and it gives so much insight, and that kind of got me thinking, like, hey, how do I get my music just to sound better? And a lot of it comes into mix bus routing, because what that allows you to do is it allows you to properly control everything. So I almost think of it as like a funnel. All of the instruments are going to get funneled into these buses, and then these buses are going to get funneled into premix or FX or master, and then premix and FX get routed into master. And then you might ask, well, what about these returns? Well, basically the way I do it is I send the signal from these instruments, either these instruments or from these buses into these returns, and then I route those back into the buses, or excuse me, I route these back into these buses. So room bus, plate bus, delay bus, and then obviously, like I was saying, these buses get routed back into whether it's the master, FX, or premix. And basically what that allows me to do is basically have complete control over the audio, because doing things like limiting, you got to, if you just keep everything on your master and you just have these returns and everything is sent to this master, you don't have the same kind of control. You have to kind of like go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until things sound great. But at least with this, you narrow it down to like a couple of channels, which you then can boost the signal. So for example, what I'll probably end up doing is I send my drums directly to the master because I want the drums to sit on top, and the premix and the effects are also going to get sent to the master, but the premix and the effects get their own set of processing. The premix gets a sidechain compression. It's basically what, after the synth, the synth and the 808 get processed. The synth 808, yeah, after the synth and the 808 get processed, I sidechain it. And then I send the FX, room, plate, and delay to FX, and then that gets its own, well, it's not right here, but it's going to get its own set of sidechain. I better add that just so I don't forget. Watch out when you copy and paste these things in. I've learned the signal doesn't always copy over, so you have to add it back. And then everything gets sent out to the master. I do maybe something on the master, and then I like to have on my master out an insight. And this basically, this can take a little while to fully understand. So you have obviously like like where things hit. What I pay attention to is LUFS, right? I want to make sure that my master hits, as close to, because this is essentially, if I could do my mix right, I don't even really need to have it mastered, especially because these are just single tracks. It's not an album. But basically, what I'm paying attention to is the LUFS. I want to push it as close, as quiet, like as loud, right? As we get closer to zero, it becomes louder. So as close to zero as possible without it distorting the audio, so while keeping it clean. The last track, I think I was able to get it to hit like -9, which is pretty good. Skrillex is able to get his to -3, which is insanity. And it still sounds pretty clean. So the goal of this mix bus routing is to not destroy the dynamics while still making it loud, or as close to like 0 decibels as, or as close to as loud as it can get, while still maintaining some semblance of like dynamics. And it's powerful. You could do a lot. It's tricky. And I definitely, when I was doing it last time, I would like solo something, but I'd still hear things. And I was like trying to figure out like, well, like, why is this doing that? So you do have to pay attention to kind of your routing. You really have to kind of in your head know your routing. I just lost there we go. I have a little, if I open up my notes, yeah, so let me, yeah, so this right here is essentially my routing. I created this. If anyone wants this, I'm honestly more than happy to share my routing, a cleaner version where it doesn't have any of my extra notes on it with people. I think it's really useful. I would love to see. I wish I had this when I like 2 years ago. That would have saved so much time and energy if I had it. But now that I know it, I'm going to really try to include it. It's time consuming, routing everything, and it can get tricky, but it really, really, really helps that workflow. Now, this is essentially what the loop sounds like. I'm going to go ahead and play the hook and I'll play the intro through the verse. So this is what it sounds like. Let me add a utility on here so I can make it louder because it's pretty quiet. And I'm going to step away from the camera really quickly. I'll be right back. So it's going to loop this for a second. I have a little bit of a headache, so I gotta have some ibuprofen. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that the funky bass was still really high. So this is what the 808 sound like. And that was the earlier sound. The earlier sound is not what it's supposed to sound like, but let's do this. So that's everything together, not the other sound. Oh. Cool. So that is that. So it's a pretty, it's a great track. Ghetto Benny makes incredible, beats, to be honest, and I'm looking forward to putting out more videos where I'm working on his stuff, putting out some videos where I'm working on my stuff, show off some tips and tricks. I want to do a whole bunch of these mixing in Ableton series where I just show it, because I know that each mix is different. This was a question that I asked Jeff. I said, what are you he has his go-to plugins, but I was like, hey man, do you think about what the plate bus is supposed to sound like? Do you think about the room or the space or stuff like that? And he's like, listen, I just do what the music calls for, which is very true. You really don't know what something needs until it's needed. And, so yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of different, tips and techniques that I'm always learning or showing. And, I'm just excited to share these things with you. So I think the first thing that I want to do is a reverse crash. So let me pull open the sample. I really like this sample. And I shared this with some of my friends, but this sample pack, ONJ, Main Stash 2.0, is free. Just Google it. And it has an incredible selection of sounds. And I don't know how he got them, but I do know that they are insanely good samples. Just fire. Especially you get into the closed hi-hats. Or you get into the snares. Any sample that's been used in recent music is there in this sample pack. So I'm constantly going to this sample pack. I've used this sample pack in a number of my tracks, and it is a fire sample pack. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to create my first effects that for the stream. I'm going to create a reverse crash. So I'm going to use a similar setup as I did for the track that I was playing for the intro. I have a video on that I did for my podcast, and then I released it on my YouTube where I talk about third-party plugins. Now, I would be lying if I said I don't use some third-party plugins. You've seen it, FabFilter, fantastic. But you can do so much with just stock plugins, and it's really useful to just use stock plugins if possible, because, for example, I have a bunch of plugins that Derek doesn't have. So if I share my project file with him and he doesn't have those plugins, he's not gonna, I guess I could freeze a channel, but there's a good chance that he won't be able to hear exactly what I want it to sound like. Also, just more control, less CPU, stuff like that, and all those things are super important to consider as you mix and make this stuff, because you don't want your computer crashing on you. Now, in the production side, when I'm putting together a song or a beat, like, having all these third-party things are really useful, whether it's a contact library or Serum or Faceplant. All those things are super, super, super useful, but you don't need them all the time, and they're not going to make you a better producer. So let me show you what I like to do for my reverse crashes. If you're super new to production, this will be a great tip to take to the bank. If you've done it for a while, you've probably seen it. But basically what I'll do is I'll take my this crash. It's a really nice, clean crash with a little bit of a tail. And I will apply my reverb processing to it. Now, to do a good reverse crash, whether it's in house music or hip hop or whatever, I like to basically make it is super long, and then I use fades to then reduce the tail. So I'm going to bump the decay rate really long. I'm going to cut the lows, which allows me to create a brighter sound. Right? If I leave the lows, or if I cut it, you can mess with pre-delay, but I don't really mess with pre-delay as much anymore. I want that transient, so I'm not going to push it full wet. I'm going to keep it at like 55. I don't really screw with any of the other stuff too much. It really, I guess, depends on what I'm using the reverb for. But for this, it's just cut the lows, boost the decay, maybe even push it a little bit more. Now, what I'm looking for, like, it's still decaying, right, is in this case, I kind of want it to take up like 4 bars. So that's why I pushed the decay as much as I did. I might trim it a little bit. All right. I'm going to go ahead and put this on pause for a second. I am getting a phone call. So let me mute the audio. All right, I'm back. Okay, so I have that really long crash. And now what I do is I freeze it. So this is the full decay. I'm going to keep this here just to possibly use later or maybe make some adjustments. But I'm going to mute it, and then I'm going to unfreeze this. Oops. I'm going to undo, remove this, copy this down. Oops. Unfreeze. And Boom. Now I can remove the decay or the reverb and stretch this out, and it is a nice long sound. So it should work. And there is no reverb plugin on there. But what I can then do is I'm going to trim this up. I'm going to reverse it, just R on Ableton, and I'm going to fade that into the little bit. That way you don't get any clicking sound, even though it won't really be noticeable. And now I've got this. And then for these, I don't like them to be super loud, so I kind of pull it down a little bit, and then I'll make adjustments as things go. So that is making reverse crashes in Ableton. So that's the first thing that I wanted to do for this track. If I zoom out, or I guess if I drop the drums down, I can see I want that. I'm gonna want that leading into the hook. I want that again, leading into the next hook, and I'm going to lead it out of the break into the hook pre-out. And, well, I did this the last track. I'm going to probably lead it out because I'm probably going to just low pass filter, or, excuse me, high pass filter. I'm going to high cut the end of this to just kind of like scoop it down. So when it ends, there's like there's an ending to it. Now I'm gonna do another super easy thing. I want to, something to save some time. If you already have a audio kick loop and you don't want to like draw in the MIDI notes, what I will do, I know that all these kicks are the same. So what I'm going to do, I don't think I'm going to include the second kick, but what I do is I will consolidate with Command J, or I just do this because I always forget that. And then I'm going to copy this audio consolidation into my MIDI track. And what I have here are all the MIDI notes for the drums. Now, I can then look at it and say, well, it doesn't really matter because it looks like in this case they're all the same, but sometimes you'll get like weird other notes. So I'm going to delete this one. I'm going to move this set of MIDI up to Berry Rim, which is my trigger, and I'm just going to slam all these so it's fully pushing the signal, the MIDI signal. And then what I can do is I can copy this out to duplicate it out on all the places where the drums are at, so that way the drums can punch through. And then I can do the same for my audio, or I can do the same for my snare. Boom. That's some weird thing going on right there. What is that? Huh. I'm gonna undo it, and I'm gonna fade these guys out. Fading. Ableton 10 made this so much easier. 9 was such a pain in the ass to fade. You had to like go into like your fade. You had to like turn on fade tool or something like that. Command J to consolidate. Boom, up. And I missed this one. Selection. Command J. And there we go. Cool. So then I'm going to copy this. It has to be a consolidated set of notes, otherwise you can't like have them as like chopped up and then try to like turn it into MIDI. All right, I'm going to go off camera for a second. All right, I am back. My streaming session was invaded by my girlfriend. Gotta respond. Sorry, I'm just responding. Let's see here. Pulling up the chat. All right. Cool. All right. Derek has joined the chat. Apparently, he says he can see me. Ugh. All right. So, I've went ahead and converted that snare audio into MIDI. I'm going to go ahead and turn those into some triggers. By the way, Derek, I can't see your text messages unless you jump into the chat room. So I'm going to go ahead, kill this set. It looks like kind of like the kick drum. It did the same thing, which is great. So I don't have to do too much cleaning up. So I can kill that. I can kill that, and then bump that up to the MIDI trigger. All right. So now that I have that, that'll make it easier for when I want to sidechain. So, boom, 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 boom. All right, cool. So now we have our MIDI triggers. I'm a little OCD when it comes to this. So I'm just going to assign color to tracks. So now they're all the same color, and everything's nice and clean. All right. I'm not entirely sure what exactly I want to do, like what exactly I want to add to the track, or whether or not I just want to do the mixing. But I'll probably go through and try to maybe do a little bit of sample and layering work. So let me listen. So I'm going to start listening to some stuff. All right. Ooh. I might honestly change out the kick sound. I like that. Yeah. will say the benefit of this being a hip hop track and this particular type of track that started off as a loop means that there's not a whole bunch of different like changes in the drum beat and whatnot. So I can do a lot of copying and pasting once I lay the kick down, and everything lines up. I'm gonna copy these over to this kick because I might go with this kick rather than the last kick. Let's see what this sounds like. Ooh. Oh, that's slammed. Yeah. I mean, important to keep in mind, it's best to keep kick drums in mono. With the benefit of Live 10, you can actually adjust, you can keep the bass, it's called bass mono, and it allows you to choose at what hertz you want it to be in mono. So 120 is where it bumps out of mono into stereo. So I like to put my bass at anything below 200 hertz as mono. You just don't need your kick to be in stereo. Just rule of thumb, keep your kicks in mono, or keep the low end of your kicks in mono. I forget the exact reason why you don't want to do it that way, or why you don't want to have your kicks be like spread or whatnot. I think it's because bass sounds they can travel in all directions. So if you start kind of allowing things to be in stereo and spreading things, you get like weird phase issues. I think that's the reason behind it, but I forget. I have this reverse kick that I used. I'm gonna keep this other kick around because I'm not sure if I fully like this. I like the sound, but I'm not sure I fully like it. And so I'm going to duplicate this because I don't want to screw up what I've already done. And I'm going to reverse kick this guy. Pull it down. I'm going to drag it over. And then reverse it, fade it in. That's the reason why I like those fades, or the reverse kicks. But it's in subtlety. I like keeping it subtle. Probably going to put this the same place as I put all those reverse crashes. So I want one here. Boom, boom, and boom. And then this thing is going to compete for space. So I'm going to pull that guy, and I'm going to move this guy over. Oops, too far. Get rid of that. And I'm going to have to see whether or not, I think this could be kind of cool, where it like kicks, it goes like, thuk-wook, thuk-wook, yeah, like that. It'll be pretty cool. It should be pretty cool. If not, I'll get rid of it. So this is what it sounds like now. And then let's go ahead and solo these two. Yeah. Yeah, pretty sweet. All right. He's already got a lot of hi-hats, so I'm not gonna screw with it too much. I do like to. I mean, I don't know if everyone does this. I mean, obviously, like, I think for this kind of music and for like electronic music and stuff like that, doing a lot of cutting of like the spaces that are not needed is super great. I know that there's a great podcast that I'm totally forgetting the name of right now, where they talked about that there's actually, it can be a problem to cut, like to do a lot of like cutting of EQ. I forget the exact reason. It's very technical. It's not something that I'm quite at on a understanding level, but they recommend that, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't just like cut everything while you're in the process of like for example, hi-hats always hang out in the higher register, so you're going to cut all the low stuff in case there's something like really low that like interferes and this and that. They say, you know, rather than cutting it, you should, I think they said, you can like multi-band, you should use a low shelf or a high shelf to kind of like push the sound down. I think it was for phase reasons, but don't quote me on that because I'm not entirely certain. For this track, I'm gonna do that because it right now works for me. I think if I get to the point where I can hear the problem, I will change course. But for this track, I'm going to go through and start cutting some stuff. I'm probably going to duplicate this because what I like to do sometimes is have a different channel for my my intro and outro, and then a channel for my my pad that is the break, just in case I want to do some processing that I don't want to automate. So, for example, this is going to be my intro and outro track. This is going to be my break. No, this is going to be my main one, and then this is going to be my break, in case I want to do some like effect processing on these, like whether it's like putting a like a VHS effect or some sort of effect that basically changes the sound. This allows me to have a little more control of like the stuff. And honestly, I don't have enough channels on here for that to really matter, that like automation is so important in this case. So I'm going to keep those separate. What else do I need to do? Let's see if having some percussion elements can add to this track. So Cymatics is great for this stuff. I've been a giant fan of their work for years. Been to a number of their meetups here in New York, and yeah, I love their stuff. Let's see here. Cool. So they've got a lot of really great. They released a project called Gold, and then they subsequently released a whole bunch of sample packs that are like geared around different hip hop artists that come with a whole bunch of different types of stuff, whether it's a loop or one shot. And Gold is kind of geared around more hip hop sounding music, so I organized it that way. So I'm gonna play around, just see if they've got any cool percussion loops. Let's start here. So we're in 125. What's here? Oh, these are one shots. Oh, those are tops. Tops. I think they keep their percussion loops to like their bigger packs. So let's go to modern. There we go. Percussion loops. This might be kind of cool. It's lower, so it'll get sped up, but let's see what that would sound like in this mix. Maybe. We'll see. Yeah, I think I can stick with that. Let's see what else we got. I wonder, this is less groovy and more straight. Let's see what that does. No, that's too much. There's a lot going on there. It would require a lot of chopping. That's kind of neat. So this will get slowed down. Let's see what that sounds like. No, it's a little too out there. I kind of like this one. I like this one. I think I'm going to get rid of these louder hits and just keep the kind of the offbeat ones. I mean, I could keep these, but I think for this case, I'm just going to see what happens if I get rid of them. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Listen, a lot of people hate on loops, but for what we're doing here, it's fantastic. You know, we've already got a groove. We just want to add some extra spice to it. You know, little things here and there that, like, while you're in the production session, you don't come up with. And these little percussion grooves, you know, it allows you to kind of add some character that you might not otherwise, and maybe down the road you can actually create your own. So if you're just starting off, and a lot of people hate on like using loops and stuff like that, but you know, it's available to you. These are royalty free, so it's not like you're stealing anyone's work. And in regards to hip hop, I mean, hip hop was built upon sampling, so I don't have a problem with it. Because it's more about choosing the right sound. You know, if you could have a whole bunch of samples and throw them together and it could sound like absolute shit. So it's all about choosing the right sounds. And if those sounds come in a loop, you know, I don't think that's a big deal. Some people will complain about that, but I don't think it's a big deal. And I'm not going to call you like less of a producer if you do so. Especially considering if you look at the Skrillex's live stream, there's a number of places where he clearly used loops that he chopped up. So, you know, take it up with Skrillex. I want to give a little more body to this snare. So let's add an audio track. I'm thinking maybe adding some sort of like clap sound, like really tight clap sound. So I'm going to go back to O and J and this dank clap might be good. So something you could sometimes do. This works more so for like snares, or not snares, but kicks. But there will be some cases where you will have to use phase cancellation to get a fuller sound. So that is another video. I keep copying this. That'll be another video, but there are some cases where to really kind of beef up a sound, you have to use phase cancellation. Basically, hey, I'm not going to get into what phase cancellation is here for right now. But in this case, these samples, I don't think trying to screw around with like the wave shape or pulling them on the right phase is really going to matter. I don't hear any sort of cancellation, so I'm going to leave these alone. So be careful about that, especially with like kicks, layering kicks. If you're not like cutting the, if you're layering them without doing a bunch of cutting, be careful with phase cancellation. But in this case, we're going to do some cutting. I just was trying to find a good, like, complementary sound. So. This just, like, adds a little extra character to the earlier samples. So I like to hop into these and, so this is not normal for Ableton. I have a mod on my Ableton where I can double click the right click. I can double right click and it pulls up kind of my shortcuts. I forget who created it, but there is this project that basically allows you to configure Ableton to do things that it doesn't typically have. Hopefully down the road, Ableton incorporate something like this, but right now they don't. So I have a couple of things kind of here that allows me to basically double click anywhere in this section and it'll pull up stuff that I have here. So I have Serum, Drum Rack, mostly I use this for Serum and Serato, and then I have a couple of effects. I need to add some here and change some things around, but especially like EQ8. I don't know why I have EQ3 here. I don't really use EQ3 that much, but EQ8 and Q3 would be great. I need to add OTT or like Pro L2 here, I think. But throw that in here. And let me look and see what's going on. So you see that low end? Like, I don't really want that low end. It's just going to muddy up my sound. So I'm going to like hard clip it. Let me do it from here right now. Do the same to this guy. Not a whole lot. Maybe down the road I'll make some adjustments, but I think that's good for now. Let's come into these hi-hats. I like to find right where the sound truly kind of ends. And then it gets into like whatever extra artifacts exist, and then that's kind of where I cut it up to. We'll get into some like mid-side EQ when it gets into the actual like mixing side. This is just kind of like the cleanup side. For those of you who are more experienced, this is probably pretty boring. Boost a little bit. I hope all my audio is right. I can't tell if I'm too far away from the mic or too quiet or whatnot. Let me see. Am I too quiet? Nope. My voice is really hitting that mixer. I threw a limiter on here because I didn't want to like kill you guys. And then let's take the same stuff and put it down in the perks. Cool. So yeah, that was pretty good. Something going on here. Probably gonna avoid any sort of like rim shot right now. Oh, we gotta move this stuff over. Keeping things named and organized, I find, saves a lot of headache down the road. I've made songs where I'm just like throwing shit at a wall and it just becomes cumbersome. So, sorry, having stuff organized, colored, labeled, etc. really saves a lot of time. Cool. Oh, yes. When we initially worked on this, we had a filter, automated filter, and I was trying to do it in live, and yeah, I sucked at it. Like, I was like, how the hell do you make this work properly? And I just really like how Ableton sets this stuff up. Logic's a fantastic program. I love it. I have it. It's one of the first DAWs that I really started using, but Ableton just makes a lot of these things much simpler as someone who does this a lot. And it's just, I think it's more, maybe it's just because I just use it so frequently that things are much more second nature here in Ableton. Yeah. All right. So automation. Select, for me, it's select auto filter. Device is already on. I'm just changing the frequency that it's going to move up. And then I've already set it. And so I just basically, it's, you know, for this, I'm going to set a point here because I might do some stuff here and I want to remember this frequency. Push it up. I like to give it a little bit of a curve there, and then this resonance follows with it, but I want the resonance to drop back down as it goes up a little bit. So I think right around here, the resonance are going to sound a little bit weird. So I'm probably going to, this should work, but I'll curve it. Watch the automation. The 808s are crunching a little bit. I'll be adjusting those later, but when you sidechain out the initial hits of the 808s, I think right now what's going on is the kick and the 808 are kind of competing for space. So I'll be making some adjustments there, but I don't need to worry about it right now. So I like that. I might also, I'm always thinking about what sorts of things can I do that will add tension, and something that you can do, whether you're, going into another section and so you're getting much more reverby, or you start with a bunch of reverb and then you kind of narrow down to a drier signal. Both of those can be really effective when it comes to building tension. Now, because I'm conscious of that fact that this is going to cut and kind of open, I'm going to keep the same for the reverb. If I put it on the other side, it might sound interesting, but I feel it'll be a little bit more messy. There's other ways of doing this, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll parallel it. So there's the dry signal and a wet signal. I think right now I can survive with it just being a single signal. I may have to, just for cleanliness' sake, I may have to turn the device off once it changes. And this is part of the reason why I'm doing separate channels, is if I wanted there to be reverb here, turning it off, turning it back on, it just becomes a mess. So that's why I have a separate channel here. So I'm going to go into the dry wet. This is a huge reverb, so I'm going to pull it back. It doesn't need to be that big. So you hear all that? The value, I'm really sorry, something caught in my throat. The value of cutting the lows means you're not getting any of that low mud from this sample in the reverb. So it's just that nice like sizzle on the top that really just kind of makes it feel very airy and nice is there. So what I'm going to do is one thing I could do, I could automate both the decay time and the dry wet, but I like this decay time. I just want to clean up the dry wet. So I'm going to start off here at 55%. It's going to drop over time, but I want it to be a slow drop over time. I really want to like everything right in the beginning. It's very kind of like we're floating on clouds, and then I want it to all suck into the hook where it's this like boom, boom, pa, boom, 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 boom. Like I really want to just down. So I'm going to just do this to make sure that, let's see if I can just do it this way without having to kill it. I might not have to turn the device off. All right. No, I don't want it to get drier. We're going to want it to, maybe it gets a little bit drier, but we're going to want this reverb to turn off, which allows us to maintain that really nice, that really nice atmosphere without sacrificing how it kind of ends right here at the hook. So let's go. Yeah, now let's see what it sounds like in context. Something when it comes to production and mixing, especially mixing, everything is in context. So just shaping a kick drum is only part of it. You could make an amazing sounding kick drum, but it's the context of the kick drum in the song, the context of the snare in the song. That's what's important. People will say, like, I'll see it in like Facebook group threads where it's like, I can't seem to get, I make a really good kick drum, but I can't seem to get the, it doesn't sound good, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of that's because they're not doing things like side chaining. They're not making space for each instrument in the context of the broader piece. So what I'll do is I'll often I'll kind of start from small and go big. And so I'll start with like a kick, shape it down to what I think it should be at, and then solo it in context of the rest of the drums or with the context of the snare to hear kind of how they play with each other, and then in the context of like everything else and kind of go back and forth and whatnot. And honestly, a lot of times it comes down to like, listen, I might like that little bit of tail that the kick has, but it just, that tail might get in the way of something else. And so in that case, it's like, well, I got to get rid of it. And it doesn't matter because you're not really hearing it. And all it's doing with it being there is muddying up your mix. Sometimes just quieting it is fine, but sometimes you just got to cut it. Yeah, that sounds really nice. I really like how, so the pad, I don't feel like the reverb really affects it as much. I mean, it definitely adds more sizzle on it, but those like chimes, those like little bells at the top that are getting affected by that reverb. Oh, so nice. So nice. It's like eating some really nice food. Oh, I gotta get rid of this. And then you can keep in mind the outro. I don't know if I'm going to use this here. Definitely want the reverb there, though. And I thought maybe having the reverb just kind of trail off would sound good, but I think that it's going to need to cut off. Probably something like that, but we'll see. The 808's just really loud right now. And it's like slamming things. Oh. My gain. Oh, I guess the gain is fine being up so that way everyone could hear it. Let me know if the audio is too loud. can't really tell. I'm gonna do a quick test. Give me a second. This is the trick of trying to live stream this, especially with all these audio levels. Like I can boost my monitor, but I can't tell if it sounds good to people listening to the stream. I'm gonna play the track, and I'm just gonna listen to the audio from my phone. All right, dope. So everything seems to sound pretty decent, which is good. Bum 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 bum. I'm gonna do similar. I'm gonna mess around with this like break thing. I did this on another track where I added some of that reverb and filtered it down a little bit to give it a little bit of movement. I like to copy the reverbs over between tracks because I found that sometimes if you like just start a new reverb, you find something that sounds good for that. But if you start having a bunch of different kinds of reverb in the same track, it's like it just sounds muddy. It can sound really muddy, and then you got to clean it up and this and that. Now, sometimes it makes sense, you know, using different reverbs for different kinds of things, different plates and whatnot. But when it comes to a lot of this like shaping, I'll use a lot of the same reverb and just kind of adjust the decay time or the dry wet to kind of figure out how much signal to send through it. When I think of like reverb, I think of reverb as in like it's the room that you're in. And then, especially when you're adjusting the dry wet, it depends on how far. So like reverb is like how far away from like dry or like right up in your face you are. So when you really add a bunch of reverb and you totally crank the dry wet to 100%, you're like way far back in the space. And then when you start to pull it back to zero, where it's completely dry signal, you're much closer in the space. And that's kind of how my mind processes reverb. You could start to like, if you really want to, you can look into like what, like when you're mixing, you're thinking about this three-dimensional space: reverb, EQ, panning. Panning is left to right, reverb is forward to backwards, and EQ is like top to bottom. EQ never feels to me like it's top to bottom, but that's kind of when they talk about placing instruments in a space and like building a good quality mix. That's what they recommend that you're like thinking about. So let's do this. I'm going to delete the automation, and then I'm going to solo this out. And then I'm going to add a auto filter. And what I'm going to do here, which I like to do, because the idea is like adding effects and stuff like that to create movement. And so what I'm going to do here, which I like to do occasionally, is in my auto pan settings, or auto filter, settings, I'm going to find the center point on this 8 bars. So like 4 bars, 4 bars. And then I will basically put an automation point here, put an automation point here, and just kind of slightly bump the slope so it's going kind of up and then coming back down. So it opens up. And then it closes back down. And then because we're using the reverb here compared to the reverb here and here, it's important to, at least in this case, to basically turn it off. I mean, it doesn't really need to be off here, but it needs to be off here. Otherwise, you're going to get that that reverb tail here, which might be nice, but in this case, I don't want it. And if we think about it in the context of the effects, which is good because we're thinking about building and releasing tension. Yeah. So if we think about it, we're coming down. Think of it as like this is the top of the hill, and then we're riding our bicycle, or the bottom of the hill. Let's think about this as like the bottom of the hill, and we're riding our bike up, and then we're slowly riding it down. I don't know if that's a great analogy, but essentially building tension, releasing tension / building tension. So it's it makes it sound good. All right. So I don't know how much long, I mean, I'm going to definitely stream for a bit longer, but I'm getting some notifications saying that I apparently need to, I've someone that I know is having a birthday party and I'm supposed to go to it. So I will stream for a bit longer, probably do some routing, and then I'm going to go ahead and get off, and then, I'll hop back on it another day and either continue with this track, but this track needs to be finished here soon, so probably showcase another track. Maybe I'll showcase kind of what I ended up doing with this track if I don't get a chance to actually show it here on the stream. I made a couple other really cool effect racks or instrument racks. One for the piano if you're a complete user, or excuse me, you're a Contact user and you have the Giant. It's a fire piano plugin. In fact, I wonder, I'm not going to showcase it here. I'll show off all those plugins, and I'm trying to learn Max for Live. That way I can make these plugins that are even more customizable. It's almost like it's a slow process. I don't think I'm going to learn Max for Live anytime soon. But I'm thinking about like, what can I make? I want to make, I want to make a Ableton plugin that allows you to kind of make, kind of like my 808. I want to make one that does it for claps. I want to do one that does it for snares. I want to do one that does it for kicks. Like I want to do one for each one of the percussion, so I can basically, in a way, stop using stock plugin or like samples that people either make or whatnot. And I want to be able to kind of build my own through using MIDI and then render them out for each original track. I really like the instrument racks and effect racks that Ableton has to offer. So the track's not quite ready for me to print it to stems yet, because there's definitely some more adjustments that I need to make. But what I want to do right now, I'm gonna do a little bit of I'm thinking about whether or not I want to start on the routing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else this track needs. I mean, it's a pretty like full track already. You know, I bet some pads could be really nice in here. I want to do like, I mean, there's already a pad here. So I don't know if adding this Drake style pad would be useful. Cause it's already got that low end and that might just muddy it up, but it could be a nice like layer. What to do? You know what? Screw it. I don't really know what key this is in, to be honest. Let's see what MIDI notes this pulled out. F. I think this might be in the key of C or like A minor. F. I wonder if I could just do just like a straight F. So you hear that? Oh, so amazing. Maybe like this. I like it. I like it a lot, but it needs some movement. Sometimes what I like to do, it can be useful because you get an idea of like what is inside what is inside of a sample, is to create a MIDI track. I'm going to drag this sample into it. And then, in this case, I think harmony would be a good conversion. It gives you a really messy set of notes, but it allows me to take a look. It looks like D. I'm like 90% sure this is the key of C. None of these notes, other than this A sharp right here, are outside of it. So it looks like D, C, G. Let's try D, C, G. Let's start with D and see what that pulls us. I suck at these shortcuts sometimes. I'll just do it this way. kind of cool. Let's see if we can push it a little further. Ooh, let's go to G, let's go down to G, D, C, G. I am not musically trained. I'm trying to get better at it, though. I wonder... Ooh, what if we did it like this? I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll give it a shot. Oh, what if we go... I don't know. I like this G, though. I just cannot figure out how to do it. Ooh, I wonder if we just create like a chord. That's cool. That's cool, but I don't know if that works. Yeah, that doesn't work for this track. So this is a patch. I don't remember where I got it, but it's called Drake's Pad. The issue is mono and legato are on. Yeah, that doesn't work either. But I could do this maybe. And then I could treat these as separate signals. So I could say, well, I've already done some frequency splitting here, but what I could do is I could treat this as being a higher patch. Like this is the stereo. I don't know if this will work. We'll give it a shot. And this is the mono. I don't know if that works. So decisions. I am going to do this. I'm going to leave this alone, but I like this. It's just a little high. That sounds good. It like gets the G, it gets the like low body of the G while maintaining the movement. These notes are good, but they need to be adjusted. Oh. So something I like to do, especially right now, a lot of this comes to just kind of getting things set. Because if you get things set right prior to starting to route and process, you can really make your life so much easier. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just hear what it sounds like without or with some of the like the side chaining and whatnot on a number of these tracks, just to kind of get an idea of where everything is going to be moving into the deeper mixing phase. So I'm applying the sidechain just so I can hear that. I might honestly just add this. I don't know. I like it. I like it because I feel like it needs something else. But that's like, I don't know, it's just too much. Maybe we do this. get rid of a lot of this. And see what happens. What happens if I add this MIDI in here? So I think that actually works out pretty nicely. I'm not absolutely in love with that, like the sound, like the melt, like the progression. And I don't know if maybe cleaning up the, like cutting the highs out a bit more and like cleaning up the sound with like some processing could help. But, you know, I'll go from there. So I still have some work I need to do on this, and I have to end this stream because I've got some stuff I got to take care of. But basically, at this point, I would do my I would honestly try to get this to a point where I was happy with the arrangement and stuff like that, so that way I could print the stems and then start going into the routing. But yeah, so I hope this stream has been useful, and I look forward to doing more streams like this in the future and diving in a bit deeper. I like these long sessions where it's just screwing around and really try to just make things work. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and make sure to check out my YouTube channel. I believe it's Kevin Savage TV. You can go to my website, kevinsavage.nyc, and find the YouTube channel as well as the podcast that I was doing some episodes of. I plan on doing more episodes here in the future. I'll make sure to keep you guys in the know with regard to Collection B and any of the work that we're doing. If you're interested in comments, feedback, anything like that on your own work, reach out to me and let me know. I'd be more than happy to give critique, comments, feedback, etc. I'm not super active right now on like some of the other platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatnot. You can reach out to me in any of those platforms, and I do try to post on there. It's just I forget to post on some of those platforms. I'm just more interested in honestly making this kind of content and making music. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you on the next video. All right, cool.